I'm a minister of the Church of Scientology. I appreciate your kindness in being able to talk with you about those who may have become estranged from you and with the hope of mending broken relationships. I'm a missionary of goodwill and hope. Life is not always pleasant. Friendships do not endure forever. Gratitude does not always result from favors and kindnesses. Even though we have to face the fact that life can be cruel, there is enough grief in life without adding to it. Spread that the world was coming to an end in 1 hour. The telephone lines of Earth would be jammed by people calling others to tell them that they love them. Life is far too short to spend in nursing disappointments, grief, and revenge. Children, former friends, and even parents often do surprising things. I think you will agree that any time spent in the repair of enmities and bringing together again those who have been close is time well invested. We feel great sorrow for those who can no longer reach those whom once they loved, and we are ready to do whatever we can to repair the torn heartstrings of those who believe they have lost their friends or parents or children and despair of ever mending their once happy relationships. Association was not always bitter. I am sure you can recall a time when there was once love and affection, and even an earlier time than that. I am sure you recall days when communication existed with a lost one, and even earlier days than that. And I'm sure you can remember times of full agreement and shared things, and many times before that. And there were not always misunderstandings, but times when you understood the other perfectly. And where love and understanding once existed, hate need not endure forever. Of course there have been problems. I'm sure you can recall an early problem you had with a strayed one. And possibly now it seems a minor thing, for problems have a habit of becoming yesterday, and perhaps this one also will. It seems reasonable that there were things you did not say, that you felt you dared not say. You can probably remember them, and to this day have not said them or told all. And on things you never said, it might interest you to know that the other knew them anyway, and in his turn said nothing. It may occur to you that you can say these things now, that they were and now are not even interesting. It often appears that the things they have done were monstrous and cruel, and that they never can be forgiven. But forgiveness is the very stuff of which harmony is made. Big people can forgive. There are certain things you want to bring about, certain changes of mind you wish to effect. Well, this is not beyond possibilities. There are certain situations which you probably want to have resolved. No one is better off to be worried, and even illness can be brought about by too much concern. Indeed, a cause of illness has been said to be depression about another or another's acts. Well, it might be possible to repair that. It might come about that some of the troubles and concerns in one's relationship can be handled. I think you will agree that it would be a relief if one's troubles with the hostilities or thoughtlessness of others were to be resolved. And possibly you would feel better, and life would be better if today's estrangements were to come to pass away. If you truly want that, why, then there is a possibility that you eventually will achieve a more livable relationship and arrive at a better and more workable understanding. The possibility that friendship and love can be restored should not be overlooked. But it cannot be arrived at on a path strewn with falsehoods or misconceptions. You want to understand what has happened, to be sure you weren't remiss or responsible, and in many ways you were not. But you must be sure you were operating with correct data. My talk here is not a defense of Scientology. It needs no defense. My effort is to reconcile people who have become estranged, sometimes because of differing opinions about Scientology, or opinions based on false information. According to the Scientology Public Relations Worldwide, every difficult situation he was ever called upon to handle with parents or the press was caused by some new or untrained Scientologist completely misinforming others as to what was Scientology data. Thus, if Scientology was any part of an estrangement, can you be sure the data given about it was correct? Realize that children or people who feel overwhelmed by someone often say things to attempt to shock others in order to demonstrate their independence. But another, realizing this, should be able to recognize and understand even such crude attempts of self-assertion for what they are. For the most part, having found more reasonable data now, they deeply regret their statements and actions and would do anything possible to repair them. Although policy letters forbid them to do this, many relatively untrained Scientologists have upset their friends and families by seeking to explain to them data their friends and families have not understood. Often these explanations were not even technically correct. The Church is sorry for this. It was a mistake to do this. The materials of Scientology are not very mysterious, and when viewed as a whole, not as fragments, are very sensible. Basic books on the subject should have been used, not verbal attempts to convey the subject. Scientology libraries contain over 25 million words of observations of life and what men in all walks have said or done or believed. Feeling challenged and invalidated, the relatively untrained Scientologist sometimes tries to make an impact on a non-Scientologist by telling him bizarre and sometimes incomplete or incorrect data on the subject instead of some useful material the other can use to better his life. Uninformed persons experience a drop in reality and feel antagonistic when this occurs. You possibly can recall some instance of this. Actually, Scientology policy letters exist to discourage this sort of thing and point out that where it has occurred, upsets can follow. It makes Scientology seem bizarre, whereas anyone studying it fully would agree that in Scientology, many hitherto strange oddities in life and behavior are easily understood and handled as well. Scientology is a subject that brings about understanding, and it should not be used to cause misunderstandings. But such lapses can also be repaired by Scientology, and the Church devotes time to encouraging their speedy repair. Oh, there's nothing as strange in Scientology as the 19th century psychology fixation that all men are just peculiar animals. Oh, or as Freud said in the last century, that all urges are based solely on sex and that there is no more to life than sexual cravings 24 hours a day. or the fascist psychiatrist's belief that frying their heads with electricity cures all criminals. No, Scientology is not as strange as that. Scientology believes in kindness, understanding, and better human relations. And that this is true is evident in the successes which have carried Scientology forward for a quarter of a century into the fastest-growing religion on the planet. So there is far more truth in it than strangeness, and people who are told about it should not be hit with strangeness out of an effort to startle or impress. Furthermore, certain dishonest people hand around to the press and others an alleged pack of false policy letters which were not written by the founder, or contained issues canceled 20 years ago, as well as forged issues. Those who pass such issues about know they are falsified and not true. So persons who have been given false or strange data should not feel guilty because they have formed an opinion, since they were given no real data with which to form a valid idea of Scientology or what the other person was really doing. Of course, it may be presumptuous to assume that either party any longer cares about the other. The wounds may have been so cruel, and the gulf stretched so unfathomably, that the former relationship has subsided to a dull ache if thought about at all. Even a forever dismissal may have ensued. But if there is any hope left, or possibility of pain, why then Scientology is genuinely interested in repairing the relationship and effecting any possible reconciliation should that be thought desirable by the parties concerned. Scientology pastors can always be approached or contacted. Scientologists do not live cloistered in monkish lives. Scientology is a subject of life and society, not a remote monastery high on some forlorn hill. The vast number of hours spent in any given day over the world by the ministers of Scientology in bringing people back to participation in the world may well be greater than that spent by any other group. They can be approached. That is why they are there. And they are willing and able to help. A considerable body of technology exists simply to effect the repair of such estrangements, and it is in use. Although, due to misinformation, you might not immediately credit it, your interests are our interests. If we can bring about a reconciliation that is to the best interests of both parties according to their own judgment, we work very hard at it. It is not in your interest or in our interest to promote or continue conflicts. Scientology is often mistaken by the poorly informed for a youth religion. We know this because parents startle us by asking if their child gets enough rest, good food, if he's changed his name. Scientology memberships and staff range in age from 16 to 80, and there's not even a majority of the young. Scientologists work and sleep much like anyone else. True, they live interested lives, but so do artists and executives and other dedicated people. True, they often study or work after supper, but it's quite certain they get enough sleep, and it's sometimes suggested that they do so by some executive or technical person if watching late TV seems to be making them hollow-eyed. They do not change their names. Of course, lady Scientologists do when they get married, but that is routine in these societies. People who are not Scientologists probably change their names more often, as any courthouse record shows. Now and then some health food store or doctor advocates a Scientologist goes on a diet, but that's no more or less than the rest of the country does. Scientologists are not separated from the society in any fashion or form. They see more people in the society than most of today's TV-anchored families. Scientologists do not beg in the streets or shave their heads. There is one small division in organizations which sometimes passes out invitations to a lecture. It also surveys people in the streets, but so do newsreel reporters and public relations agencies. There's no begging in the streets. And as to writing their parents, when a chaplain finds some younger staff member of Scientology organizations is creating concern by not writing his parents, there is a whole handling arranged, which may include something the staff member was never taught in school or in life, how to write a letter or talk to his parents. Where Scientology is concerned, estranged fears are groundless. Scientology is of the society at large, not some reclusive haven for the withdrawn. As a matter of fact, most Scientologists live at home quite happily. Possibly misinformation given some people from various sources has caused them to confuse Scientology with something else. You might be surprised to what degree the interests of parents in a younger Scientologist become the interest of Scientology organizations. People are important to Scientology. Because you live and walk upon the earth, you are important to us. In an age where 19th century psychology and psychiatry fought to degrade man to a decadent animal, in an aftermath of theirs and other Nazi attacks upon the basic decency of man, in a time of bloody wars and civil violence, the Scientologist has resurrected faith in the dignity and importance of man. It's a long uphill road, of course. Scientologists are making progress on that road. And it might not be believed on parent or former associate that they themselves might someday become important because they were once associated with Scientologists. And did you know that many young people joined Scientology just to find a way to help their parents or to improve their relationships with those who now cruelly scold them or invalidate them for doing so? And they succeed in helping them. There are numerous cases of it. Parents, and even those antagonistic to Scientology, are important people to us. Important not because of what they might do, but important because they are human beings. In times gone by, the aristocratic families of Europe always gave a son or daughter to the church. It was customary because the noble family felt a responsibility for the community and country as a whole. They were not only concerned with their own petty quarrels and family ambitions. They did not consider they had lost that family member or relation. It was their way of contributing to a better world. Many parents and friends not misinformed feel that way about their Scientology relation. Some Scientologists who are people antagonistic to their being in Scientology believe that the objection is to people being helped. They do not understand an apparent prejudice against assisting one's fellow man, or an invalidation of that assistance. They believe in tolerance, and tolerance of race, color, creed, and the beliefs of others is a large part of Scientology teachings. Quite reasonably, they do not understand why some person might be intolerant of their religion when the Scientologist has no slightest urge to be intolerant of the other person's. Scientology, as a religion, has been upheld in every court, in every land, as a true religion, not once, but many times, and in the highest courts across the world. Even the infamous Internal Revenue Service had to grant exemption to the majority of Scientology churches. Criticism of another's dedication is no way to make another remember one with kindness and affection. The name and repute of any man is a valuable thing. It's a cherished thing to be thought of well by others. But how many times have you realized, possibly with a shock, that your good points, the decent and thoughtful things you did, went wholly unnoticed, unappreciated, and unremarked? And as far as your being known or really understood is concerned, possibly there are instances in your life when misinformation has been spread around about you that was no more true than that spread about Scientology or Scientologists. It may have occurred to you that your real and decent actions were not even seen or noticed at all. It is a bit of a sly control of people to eternally threaten them with their misdeeds or rage against their beliefs and good actions. It's a sort of a threatened robbery of their good name and repute. It's not a very wise thing to do. One has to ask oneself at such a time whether one has even been observed at all, no matter what he did. Might it not be true that anything he or she ever did would be equally invalidated, and whether it would be at all wise to do anything that was wanted? Or there might have been earlier times when one was innocently doing something else, following other studies or ambitions, and that these as well were railed against. Possibly one retains his good name, to say nothing of his self-respect, only by doing what he himself knows is right. For if he has never been observed with reality in the past, will he be any better seen or appreciated in the future? Until reality on oneself and understanding of his own motives enters the scene, nothing whatever stands much chance of being repaired. No force, demand, invalidation, or argument, much less the threat of robbery of one's repute, will be of any real persuasion. The only road to happiness is respect for another's opinions and beliefs, without surrendering one's own. For in so surrendering, one loses his respect for himself. It is not always understandable to friends and families when someone abruptly leaves their midst and cuts communication with them. One can sympathize with homes and circles where this has happened, but it is not new in man's history, and indeed has been going on for hundreds of thousands of years. New York is crowded with waifs and runaways, many from good homes, who would seem to have had no stateable reason for disconnections. Churches often give them refuge. In effect, that refuge is in reality a sanctuary, much like that afforded by monasteries of the Middle Ages. It is not a good thing to blame churches. I am sure parents and friends would rather see their loved ones in kind hands than frozen, starved, and left in a gutter by a modern careless society. There are countless reasons why such departures occur. Chief amongst them are several causes. Dislike of being further obligated for all the favors, care, and indulgences is one of them. Another is a hopelessness of being able to obtain goals set for them by others. They doubt their talent or skill to attain such unwanted ambitions, or simply feel they should do something else in life. Often they suspect such goals simply spring from the personal ambitions of parents or friends and are wished off on them second-hand. We of the church know and appreciate that many were raised in decent and caring homes and even educated at some expense. But men must do what men must do in life, and women as well, and demanding they live up to impossible standards or goals they do not want or even dislike can cause a sudden chasm to occur. It is unreasonable to blame churches and welfare groups because they help such people. I am sure you do not feel it would be better if they died, friendless and abandoned in a gutter. To hate them because they saw a brighter light for man, to scorn and invalidate them just drives them further away, doesn't it? Their home life might have to be improved before they would again confront it. Totally ideal relationship exists perhaps only in dreams, but certain disturbing elements can be subtracted from the average familial relationships. There would be far fewer broken marriages and estranged children and friends if these items were majorly handled. Nagging accomplishes nothing. Courtesy must increase in direct ratio to the nearness of people. Ambitions of other persons cannot be ignored. Continual criticism is more likely to convince the other that he or she is disliked than to change them. Invalidation of what the other thinks is right will not make him over. It is more than likely to widen estrangement than to close it. One must accept the times one lives in. It is a changing and decaying world. The family has been breaking up increasingly since the first beginnings of the Industrial Revolution a century and a half ago. Vice, crime, violence batter the oncoming generations. Drugs are a refuge from an increasingly harsh and uncaring society. One must not overlook the determination of some to cease to hide and do something about it. Those who believe such social chaos does not exist today are living blindly in some distantly lost and nostalgic past. They, of course, would not understand the ambition of others to better the society, or at least arrest its decline. Again, the breakup of the family and friendships may not be due at all to any organization or new religion. It may be due to the times we live in, and the dregs of useless wars and spiteful governments who have long since lost control of their societies. It may look like disconnection when it is only the progressive breakup of our society. So no real fault need necessarily be found with family members or friends just because it's a chance to do something about the society at large. Despairing of ever handling their former homes, credit must be given to courage and high purpose. There's more to life than oneself, or being a pawn in the opinions and ambitions of others. A casual tour of some modern schools or universities could make the observer wonder why any decent child or person would consent to stay in one today. Teachers and security guards beaten and killed, students glaze-eyed with drugs draped across doorways and desks. It can be a desperate arena. And the subjects taught are often not subjects anymore, but confusions. Reading, writing, and arithmetic seem to have become perplexity, illiteracy, and mystification. In the war-mad days of 19th century Germany, the psychologists spawned the technology of degrading all men to animals. He is in charge of your schools today. It is compulsory training in every grade and teacher level to regard all students and friends as treacherous beasts and atheists. Where the older generation did not stem this rape of education, should they criticize members of the younger generation who draw aside from the beast to attack it in the flank and try to civilize the monster their betters supported and helped create? The schools the taxes pay for today are not the schools the older generation has such fond memories of. Bussed and beaten and dismayed, going nowhere, learning nothing at vast parental expense. One need not be very questioning as to why a student would bolt his school and go to people who can teach and who are making inroads with school reform. In Scientology organizations, we teach them typing, business administration, accounting, and many other skills that are invaluable in any sphere of life. And we teach them a higher technology in these that is found in most businesses. One can hide and pretend and say, without any inspection of evidence, that Scientology is not doing anything about it. The facts, statistics, and rooms full of documents prove that Scientology is doing something about it. Even Playboy magazine recently stated that drugs were dying out in universities as the students became Scientologists. A new avalanche cannot be halted with misinformation or said not to exist. You cannot stop the wind by saying poo-poo. Illiterate PhDs are learning to read in Scientology. Drug-dazed youth is being rescued by Scientology. Why, in the very place where psychology began, Berlin, the technology of the founder, as used by Narconon, is an official drug rehabilitation activity and has been stated officially to be the most effective. And so it is in many, many states. One who is properly informed of facts, not lies, could not be otherwise than proud that his former friend or family member was part of a new wave, and that all is not hopelessness and future dark ages. Someone has to do something about it. One cannot always loll, gazing at the sky, ignoring the sinking boat. Is your friend or child a dog because he seeks to arrest the decline of civilization? No, I think not. Only the psychologist who began the decline thinks all men are dogs. It would be easy to turn disdain to pride. It is easy. Just become truly informed, not lied to by the men who want your civilization to die. A part of the lie stems from ignorance of many things. Let us take some examples. Brainwashing is a technical activity engaged in by the Pavlovian School of Psychiatry and Psychology. Pavlov, a graduate of the German School of Psychology that found all men to be dogs, went back to Russia and experimented on dogs. By the accident of a flooded kennel in Leningrad, he found that all his dogs, which had been trained to slather when a bell rang and all that, found that all his dogs had had the training wiped out by a 3-day experience of near death by drowning. "Aha," he cried enraptured, "I can now wipe out all past political, familial, and religious belief in men and train them the way I want." And Stalin had him into the Kremlin in 1928 and had him write down everything he felt would do this, and so brainwashing was born. Well, Pavlov's tech was tried on 2,000 old-line Bolsheviks in the treason reign of terror in the early 30s, and only a dozen or so were successfully turned. Some thousands more American prisoners in the Korean War were given the great benefit of this tech, and only 22 responded. Such statistics are consistent where brainwashing is done. In short, it does not work. But then psychology has not worked in schools either, has it? In some countries, parents are told by criminals, some of them now in prison, that if they pay $15,000 cash, they will get the child declared insane and institutionalized, and then kidnap him and brainwash him. They call it deprogramming. Aside from the fact that this is a very strange way to bring up children and show parental love, letting a daughter or son, for instance, be imprisoned in a dark closet for weeks, forced onto liquor and drugs, beaten and raped, it never seems to occur to such parents that if brainwashing worked, it would also wipe out all family training, affection, and connection. Why would they want a zombie? Fortunately, brainwashing, and deprogramming too, is a fake and a fraud and does not work. You can punish some people until they say, yes, yes, anything to stop the raping or beating or drowning, but they promptly say no again the first time they can be absolutely sure they won't be tortured again. Stalin found this out in the early 30s. Parents find this out when their $15,000 has been blown on booze, and they have a wrecked, drugged, or diseased son or daughter on their hands. Anyone doing, ordering, or permitting deprogramming is guilty of child abuse and should be so charged. Don't go to crackpot authorities, already in deep trouble with their colleagues, to get the facts. Go to the local library. Look up Pavlov and Stalin and brainwashing. That's the place we got this data. We didn't listen to crackpots. We went to the original papers and sources. And so should you if you don't take my word for it. Some people, unfortunately, would rather listen to lies than expend. But no happiness can be based on lies, and only truth can set you free. If you cared to examine the records, you would find it less costly than other means of helping the mind and yourself. Scientology is the only practice of the mind or spirit which gives a refund if the person is not pleased or helped. That is a fact. Do patients ever rise from their coffins to get the doctor's fee returned? Can a psychiatric victim still talk enough to ask for his money back, or talk any more at all? And what happens if he does? He gets taken to court or the local institution if he does. A person would have to be most fully and willfully misinformed to go on believing Scientology was unfair where donations are concerned. What other church lets the congregation take their money back out of the collection plate when they don't want to belong anymore? Only Scientology. And people are sometimes misinformed concerning the income of the founder of Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard. He receives no percentage of any fees paid to organizations or the church. As a matter of fact, why should he? Since 1930, L. Ron Hubbard has been and continues to be a best-selling author. In just the last 6 months, the gross public sales of his works brought his publishers $2,505,653. As his tax records would show, 75% of his income comes from public book sale royalties and the remaining percent from past personal investments. In his early days, he wrote popular books in order to finance all his research himself. In fact, to this day, no organization pays for his research and has not even refunded it. What need would he have for percentages of church training and processing fees? He has been a best-selling author for 47 years. And furthermore, his first book, Dianetics, The Modern Science of Mental Health, is right this minute #1 on the bestseller list of West U.S. distributors. What other author on the planet has ever had a book back on the bestseller list 27 years after publication? Across the world, he outsells any other living author, even Alistair MacLean. And to top it, Hubbard is currently also contracting for the movie rights of one of his books, and you know what Hollywood pays. But he himself is spending his time just now writing and making short films for Scientology organizations, for which it is doubtful if he will ever receive any pay. Envy and jealousy can prompt a great deal of spite, and you even find this in some reporters, all of whom wish they could write. But not even these are much critical anymore. They are better informed today. Oddly, he does not really care very much about money, and 10 years ago forgave all church debts to himself, and even tried to cut off all his Scientology book income as well. To most people, it seems a real thing to do. They wouldn't do it, but then they aren't L. Ron Hubbard. He is, as any of his millions of friends will tell you, truly interested in his fellow man, and in you as well. Possibly that is why he is a legend in his time. Why ask his few enemies about him? Why not ask his billions of friends? If you compactly laid out, edge to edge, the certificates, awards, honors, and trophies he has received from cities, states, and governments for his work in education, drugs, and Scientology, they would reach 100 yards easily. Few alive today have saved so many lives or is so widely loved. All I tell you about funds and fees and refunds is the subject of verifiable valid records. Possibly any trouble Dianetics or Scientology ever had began on May Day 1950 when the U.S. government, excited by the possibility of monopolizing Hubbard's work, sought to force him into classified government service. In Washington, they told him they wanted him to work on projects to make people more suggestible. When he declined, they threatened him, and typically he refused to bow, and the war between the government and Scientology was on. Over the years, all of it past history now, books were written against Dianetics and Scientology. Floods of anti-press came out. In the 60s, foreign governments attacked it, instigated inquiries into it. All for nothing, of course. They all failed, every one of them. They never halted the progress of Dianetics and Scientology or Hubbard. And for the simple fact that there was nothing wrong with Dianetics and Scientology or its organizations. A typical example was the Paulette Cooper book. At the end, she surrendered in court and freely of her own accord attested under oath that the incidents and so-called evidences of her book were not based on any factual data or known data of any kind, and were wholly unsupported. This astonishing document, wherein she calmly attested the book was wholly false, is not single or alone. Magazines, papers, and other books read by a trusting public have made similar statements and settlements. One government apologized. Another, Victoria, Australia, passed a law to keep Scientologists from suing members of a court of inquiry when it was found they had uniformly lied and falsely arranged testimony against Scientology. There has been a long parade of wins over such books and attacks. All of them turned eventually to the credit of Scientology. Some copies, of course, even though repudiated by their authors or publishers, are still kicking around in dusty corners. The attacks were so prolonged, so baseless and filled with such false data, and suits were so easily won by us that Scientologists continue to search for the original instigators. Freedom of information suits in the United States have finally revealed the truth. The U.S. government authored this black propaganda campaign. They falsified files, sent imaginative false reports to unsuspecting police and governments over the world, who then, having foolish faith in them, launched failing attacks. At this moment, the United States government is under suit for conspiracy to the amount of $750 million for a quarter of a century of knowing lies. They had edited, distorted, and falsified every record they had on file, knowingly and viciously. They had fed such trash to unsuspecting authors and unquestioning press, and had created an international campaign of falsehood, a rather monstrous thing to do for a responsible government, I think you will agree. The evidence has all been collected. The government attorneys know the suit will be won by Scientology. They are sweating. Well, it seems a rather expensive revenge for not having gained a monopoly on a technology which now belongs to the people. Press today on Scientology is overwhelmingly good and voluminous. And just the other day, the mighty London Times in Parliament was saying in columns what wonderful people the Scientologists are. When you are doing nothing wrong, when you use any of yesterday's falsely manufactured data to try to convince someone Scientology is a bad thing, you're likely to look ridiculous to him. He has the documents available to him through any guardian's office, and they also tell him how you were misinformed. He himself, knowing Scientology, knows what the truth is. If a family or friend objects to the amount the nation is making in Scientology, they overlook the fact that not all people do things for money only. Maybe that's how the society got like it is. Money is all there is in life. But more importantly, by running about and making trouble for the relations organization, it just may be that they are reducing that particular organization's income to a point where they find it hard to pay their staff very much. Such actions have never been able to destroy any Scientology organization. They just made it hard on the individual staff to get paid. Staffs never quit. They just tighten their belts and carry on anyway. By nagging and invalidating a staff member, his antagonistic connection might be reducing his ability to make things go right. Not a very friendly act. I will not minimize it. In some organizations, the cost and effort of handling psychotic agencies leaves little left over. There is no reason why ministers and staff should not be paid well. For years, organizations left their donations so low, despite inflation around them, that it was hard to survive. Efforts are being made to remedy this. It's a rather simple solution. If you want your relation to prosper at what he's doing, help him to do so. Don't make it almost impossible for him to live by hammering at his public lines. If you want him to be educated, then let Scientology teach him to read. If you want him off drugs and leading a decent life, then don't drive him back into schools and the drug culture. Help him save the victims of that culture instead. Some parents and relations demand to see if their son or daughter got any better because of Scientology. When they open their eyes and look, they will see that he or she has. One mother who had been demanding it loudly finally did really see her son and had to admit he was much better. And another son, whose family for years was unhappy with him for being in Scientology, heard his grandfather was dying and went home and saved his life with some standard Scientology. if you say drug addiction is bad, that crime is bad, if you say illness and unhappiness and insanity are bad, then you cannot also say man should have no hope of escape from these things. Man is caught in a morass of hate and prejudice. In the hands of trained Scientologists, Scientology does everything it ever claimed it could do. You must not overlook the possibility that this is true, and demonstrably true, and you cannot but consider the magnitude of the crime of trying to deny mankind the road out of their misery. Only the insane seek to destroy sanity. You've been very patient in listening to me, and I appreciate it. But now I'm going to give you a challenge, and it is this. Try to reconcile your past differences. Try to look and be correctly informed about one another and what each other really is doing. A poet once said, "If we could read the secret history of our enemies, we should find in each man's life sorrow and suffering enough to disarm all hostility." Do your estranged friend or relation, your wife or husband, mother or father, son or daughter, a favor, a big favor, and do one for yourself as well at the same time. Try to communicate with one another, and don't let past hatreds or present lies about what one another believes or is doing keep you forever apart. It takes big people to do that. I think you can. If you wish to reply in any way to this talk, feel completely free to address Can We Ever Be Friends, Chaplain, Church of Scientology, Guardian Office, St. Hill Manor, East Grinstead, Sussex, United Kingdom. We care what happens in your life and to you. We listen.